So all the Doctor Who specials 2023 are out. One pretty much perfect, two debatably great, and one, for me at least, was incredibly fun, but struggled to hit that high bar the others cleared with ease. I am Patrick Francis Perring, Sleeping Dark, and formerly known as Red Demon 13. Please pour yourself a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's jump into why I think Russell T Davies has come back swinging. We start this very long and winding adventure not actually with the specials themselves, as easy as that would be, but with the previous era of the show and its head writer Chris Chibnall. Fan of the show, and the era or not, we will need to discuss the important parts of his inclusion to the narrative before moving forward. So if you could stick with me, that would be great, but if not, jump here to the beginning of my thoughts on the specials themselves. The Chibnall era of the show doesn't have many fans. Unfortunately, I find myself as part of the majority here, but I don't think everything the show did during this period is worth the extent of the hate and backlash it received primarily for Jodie Whittaker. By the time of her announcement, I'd only seen her in Broadchurch, and honestly, at that point, I thought she was terrible. But her first episode as the Doctor was a smash hit with me, despite the issues I have with the episode, specifically the later half depiction of Tim Shaw. But Jodie did win my favor very quickly, despite my negative thoughts leading into it, and I think she continued to nail that performance all the way until the end. The biggest criticism I have is pretty much the same thing everyone has discussed on either side of the fandom 1,000 times since the beginning of this era: the writing. This video could be about every episode's writing, but we aren't going to focus on every detail, despite that being a goldmine of literature study. In this stage of the video, I'm only going to discuss the villain in Rosa, the ending of Kablam, Orphan 55, and Flux, plus Power of the Doctor and the Timeless Child arc. I say arc, more backstory. These topics specifically because I have opinions that some might find controversial, but connective to my opinions, the recent specials, and my general taste towards the show, negative and positive. Then we'll move on to the specials themselves. The villain in Rosa is an example of lost potential, which you can correlate with most of my negative opinions going forward, because I think losing what could be great is much worse than something being completely bad and unsalvageable. Vasco is primarily a racist dick beyond anything else, which alone doesn't make for a bad villain in my opinion. Some could disagree with that, and that's a valid opinion. I think a villain can be incredibly simple. Krasko being a racist dick can be more powerful than a morally grey racist, because in daily life for many people, racism and hate can come from anywhere, at any time. Having a character be an example of unexplainable hate is a good way to demonstrate how to fight back against someone who refuses to change or listen. Which if you watch this episode, the episode Rosa, that's pretty much what we got, despite the dumb plan of Krasko going back in time to stop Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks sitting on the bus and taking a stand is a very important moment, and saying otherwise would be stupid. But having that be where he considered things started to go wrong feels weirdly decided. He has all of time to choose from, and that's when? As the episode itself demonstrates, the movement was cooking way before Rosa even stepped onto the bus. I could have ignored that and called that just the start of things to come, a test run for his future endeavors, but then somewhere in the writing process they decided to remove the character from the series pretty much altogether, which ruins any possible development for the character or the ability for other writers to use him. We don't really specifically know where he was sent either, but it's implied he's with the dinosaurs now, which I don't expect to have much time travel technology lying around, and after the amount of negativity this era received, I highly doubt we'll ever see him again, and I think that's a massive shame. Now we move on to the Kablam section. I really like the episode, and I don't really care about the ending. People complain about it, but I remember so little about the ending specifically. Compared to every other negative I have throughout the season and era, it just feels like the lowest hanging fruit compared to everything else you could complain about. The episode was fun to me. Orphan 55 has some issues, but for me, I think the episode contains what makes previous Moffat stories so engaging and entertaining. We have a creature that's terrifying with a lovely design that I thought was very scary the entire time, Sure, some of the bad acting was distracting when the tension was high, but it never took away from what the episode was trying to achieve, for me anyway. The end of the episode had a forced global warming message speech thing, but you can hand wave that so hard because it's barely anything. If you don't like it, you can totally ignore it. And if you just don't like the story being set on Earth, you only have to ignore 2 to 3, maybe 4 foreshadowing moments throughout the entire story before the reveal. It doesn't have to take away from your enjoyment if you don't want it to. If you thought that was bad, go watch an episode of Captain Planet and tell me you weren't frothing at the mouth due to anger over the episode, because some of you really, really hated Orphan 55 for doing almost nothing. It's just a harmless story, but people treat it like it's just the worst thing ever. I'll say it, Orphan 55 is overly hated, and people will change their minds on it in a couple of years for sure. I definitely believe that. We've seen the same thing happen to Colin Baker's run as the Doctor, and we've seen the same thing happen to Star Wars, the prequel films anyway. Now, Flux is the most important moment to happen to the canon of the show since the Time War was referenced in Rose. This 6-part story led to the destruction of half the universe, a fact that the show refused to acknowledge for 4 entire episodes afterwards. We only really got confirmation the universe was still like that in Wild Blue Yonder. The fact filled me with such rage for almost 2 entire years, because you don't just do that storyline, have that much impact within the narrative of the franchise, and just walk away. The universe is big, and in Doctor Who, many alien species, planets, cultures, and histories were obliterated without a blink of an eye. Sure, we'll just have a swashbuckling adventure with the Sea Devils and leave that fact open for people to just wonder if it happened or not. Then after we don't process any of that information whatsoever, we get to the Timeless Child story arc. I've come around to it to some degree, not because it was good, but because, once again, the potential drama and narrative weight is possible. It's not completely gone or unsalvageable yet. Changing the show's canon is fine to me. Doctor Who is flexible enough to take it, but when you start the setup for that, but do nothing with it, I start grumbling because all you've done is change the possible storylines for everyone else, and provided nothing of your own. If something amazing is established with this new backstory, I won't be thanking Chris Chibnall. I'll be praising the one who actually put pen to paper and worked with the storyline that majority of people don't want. Cap off this era, we have The Power of the Doctor, an episode I would consider to be an incoherent mess that tries to be as fan-service-y as possible. I will give the episode one bow of respect, in that it tried to do what Russell aimed to do with the specials. It gave the Doctor pause to contemplate on how they have treated past companions, and the acceptance of those frayed relationships. I don't think the messy plot created the right environment for a personal narrative like this, but I do think we got something out of it. The conversation between Seven and Ace was a scene full of emotion and heart, which in a way is especially poignant when it's coming from someone like Seven, who sometimes struggled to give that kind of response when needed. Which is interesting when comparing that to the previous scenes with 13. A character can be bad at communicating emotions and be hesitant to share that kind of moment due to feeling inadequate or scared, but pushing those moments, even if the character isn't always great at it, means you can create a point in time that people will remember, because that doesn't usually happen. The implementation of Five and Tegan wasn't really anything we haven't seen before. It's a lot of them talking about the same things we always see these two characters, or Five and another companion, or even Doctor just talk about. It's always... Adric is usually the big thing, because that's kind of the biggest thing that happened in his era. We have... Tegan's usually a big factor, a little bit Anissa, maybe there's one little line about Turlough. That's it. And Turlough was even forgotten in the specials. When they were speaking about gingers, which is just sad. So their conversation, their little moment, doesn't really do much, and I think it's sad. I think you could have taken that away and actually given the plot and maybe Seven and Ace a bit more time to be developed throughout it. Hell, I'd even say the fact that they brought up Adric isn't a problem I have. I love Adric's death. I think that's one of the best moments in the entire franchise. But it doesn't add anything. You've done this before. You've mentioned it before. There is nothing new to reference with these characters because you're not making anything new with these characters. It's all been said, it's all been done. But here's Seven and Ace with a story that in the show itself wasn't really addressed. What happened to Ace has never come up in the main show. So having this moment between both of these characters nearing the end of their era of Classic and then Power of the Doctor, Chris Chibnall didn't know at the time, but kind of the end of the New Who era for what it is until Russell gets back. So there is something really special you could have really connected with. Like, this is the end of an era. Like, hell, you could have still done that. Jodie's era was ending with that episode, but we didn't get that. We didn't get anything new. We just got more of the same, and I think that's really disappointing. Generally, that's how I feel about a lot of the classic Doctor stuff throughout Power of the Doctor. It's mostly just references upon references for the sake of little impact whatsoever within the narrative, besides Seven and Ace. And when you look at the Classic Who references from that perspective, it becomes weird and a bit strange when none of the modern Doctors have come back for it, which is fine. They've had their time, and there'll be a lot of actors and characters on the screen with different things, and already you don't have enough time for the bonkers, incoherent story Chibnall's trying to tell, and the stuff with 7 and the stuff with 5. Like, there is no space for what they have. But it would have been pretty cool to see 12, I think. I know Peter doesn't want to come back, and that's fine. I get that, but the inclusion of maybe David or Matt would have just been complete. But with just the classic Doctors, it's just, I don't know. I'm kind of bouncing between these two things. If there's not enough, there's too much. It's not really good. It's kind of bad. I guess that's the same angle, but you know what I mean. The reference approach becomes even stranger when you look at it from the perspective of 13's era in general. Because actively in her first season, they tried to do original content, which isn't a bad call. But in season 2, they decided to bring back the Master. Yeah, so we're throwing out original content. We're bringing back the Master just to destroy Gallifrey again. Well, he didn't do it the first time, obviously, but Gallifrey has been destroyed again. Despite what felt like recent developments from Moffat to bring Gallifrey back. The entire plotline set up from Day of the Doctor was to revive Gallifrey and begin the search for it. The Doctor would inevitably find it again, but this episode had no issue swiping that story aside as if it didn't matter, despite Heaven Sent, debatably one of the greatest Who stories ever created, connect to that storyline. We could also look at the Sidemasters, but I don't want to touch that moment with a 10-foot pole. All of these moments just intertwine with the negative perception this era has created. For the positive moments, for the weird moments, for the memorable moments, everything within the Chibnall era has a negative moment tied to a good one. So you can't talk to the public without also mentioning something negative or controversial. This negativity that was felt towards the writing in the Chibnall era wasn't quelled during its run, obviously. From beginning to end, it was always there, and racist, sexist pricks made any negativity towards the show sound bad, because people who were critical had similar complaints to those who were just being hateful. Some of these racist, homophobic, and transphobic people tried to hide, but a lot didn't, and being someone who had complaints made me question the opinions I had towards the show for a long time. It's why for the longest time I have always tried to make it clear that Jodie Whittaker wasn't my problem. Never been my problem. And to praise the few episodes I do like, because it wasn't her, and it wasn't always the writer involved. Majority of the issues I had were created by one writer, and the behind-the-scenes interviews with Chris Chibnall only confirmed that opinion. The general negativity made people scared for the show and its future. When RTD was confirmed to be returning with David Tennant and Catherine Tate, some of the negativity continued, but almost in reverse. Some fans of the Chibnall era felt like it was the BBC trying to undermine the previous era, and even some of those who were excited about the future of RTD felt the same. It felt like a last attempt to save the show, and that opinion, despite the reality, was a valid opinion for many. The show, from the general public perception, had been dying in favor long before 13 hit the screen. You could say the beginning of this fall started at the end of the highest peak. The 3 run-up episodes to the End of Time specials, and the specials themselves, were the highest the show's popularity has ever reached with the public. Debatably with Matt Smith in America and whatnot, but that's definitely a debatable view. But from my perspective, talking to friends, family, and strangers, most people love David Tennant and his run. But the introduction of Matt Smith was a harder pill to swallow. And that opinion hasn't come from dumb statistics or what people on Twitter have been saying or what the news has been saying or just like it hasn't been coming from anywhere. It's just been coming from my personal experiences talking to with people who like the show but aren't necessarily big fans of it. It's a normal, natural opinion. And yes, that's definitely not going to be an opinion with everyone. That's impossible. But I've spoken to a lot of people, and this is what they have said. Not only was Matt Smith a totally different interpretation of the character, but the vibe of the show had changed, and in a big way, and that was something people felt mixed on. People would generally stay, but by the time Peter Capaldi had hit the screen, families started turning off and began drifting away from the program. That's due to a number of reasons that we aren't going to get into, but the end of the RTD and David Tennant era was the end of an era for many people, many families. So having them come back and during the 60th anniversary felt like a big moment and a big celebration, which it was, but to a good number of people it felt suspicious. A big revival like this happening just after what people considered to be one of the worst storylines in Doctor Who history? The writing was on the wall regardless of what RTD or the BBC wanted to do about it. So our show saviors of RTD, David Tennant, and Catherine Tate have come back with 3 new specials. The Star Beast, Wild Blue Yonder, and The Giggle. All of the specials feel different, but connected in a way that the show has struggled to do in the past. A connection of emotion. These specials serve as a way to give the character of the Doctor a break, and the viewer a level of separation both narratively and from the production side of everything. From all international viewers' concerns, the BBC has given Doctor Who the production rights to both RTD and Disney. This is a change, a big one, and I think RTD knows that and has handled the audience expectations perfectly. Throughout the Chibnall era, the show was treated as a secret side project that no one within the production could even whisper about until the day it airs. But RTD and the social media accounts have kept the fanbase and audience up to date with announcements and reveals for an entire year before the specials dropped, which felt so strange. After years of barely any news about a show that the BBC always pretended to care about, but struggled to keep up with. The show felt alive again, even if it wasn't on our screens for a whole year. But how did it fare on screen? Well, let's get into that. The Star Beast is an adaptation. I don't know, really. I haven't checked out the source material, but from what I have gleaned, I feel like it's a pretty faithful adaptation, while also doing its own thing. Featuring a character I've seen for a few years now, but has finally made its first on-screen TV appearance. The Meep. The Meep, I would argue, for the first 2/3 of this episode, was one of the strongest parts of it, both being a source of comedy and a good way to introduce the audience back into this familiar Doctor Who format. Been too many episodes since that kind of format. We'd last seen a similar setup in Legend of the Sea Devils, but that came roughly 20 months beforehand. So giving the audience a clean setup, and especially for returning Who fans who skipped Jodie, this was a really good call. We have the 14th Doctor dropped into this environment, more just like mere meters away from Donna Noble, a character the Doctor has literally spoken about multiple times. Not to anyone who doesn't know Donna, obviously, but spoken to multiple people about Donna, and been like, if she remembers me or anything we did together, she will die. We also have a vague mystery of why he has the same face as 10, but that is so poorly handled that you kind of have to just hand wave it because it doesn't matter in the end. It's just an excuse to bring David Tennant and Catherine back, and that's fine. Just nod and wave and say yes, you know? The real emotional climax of the episode has nothing to do with the Meep itself. Great character, excited to have them back in the future probably, but at a certain point their importance compared to what the audience cares about is trumped pretty quickly. So, like as I said, the last third totally cuts out. The emotional climax hits when 14 has to use the Dr. Donna, the Dr. Donna mental hybrid thing, to save the day. The reason is forced upon the scene, but David and Catherine have such wonderful chemistry between each other, it doesn't really matter at the end. It's so much easier to ignore something that's bad or boring if there's something so superior happening within the scene, like good acting or chemistry or just a few bits of fun writing here and there that elevate the scene beyond what it could be. People will just generally put up with a lot if it means at some point they'll get something amazing. If there's just a nugget of amazing, people will put up with a lot if that thing is very, very good. The moment 14 uses the activation words to activate the Dr. Donna, it's not explained to the audience what's happening, but you can figure it out very quickly, and it's such a powerful moment, especially combined with this version of the Doctor who shows these signs of emotional awareness that 13 didn't often share, and at one stage refused to attempt. And this emotional awareness is a positive that's shown throughout these three main specials. It's funny looking at this moment and a similar one in Wild Blue Yonder. We know based off the advertising of these specials that Donna was going to survive. She's going to be in the next two episodes. This scene is just so perfectly handled that despite we know she's going to survive, but the scene is pushing and telling us that she's going to die. This is the moment that Donna dies. It's due to their chemistry, David and Catherine, that we get sucked into the moment, and the writing, the scene itself. You just get sucked into it, and the advertising. I didn't forget about it, but I was like, I don't care. I could believe Donna in this moment could die, and I feel the same thing about a scene that happens in Wild Blue Yonder. Just their chemistry, the writing, their acting. It nails every beat within these scenes, and it creates these special moments that defy the outside logic of the show with, filming and these characters and all the extended things that we definitely know are going to happen. Like, we know the Doctor and Donna are going to face the Toymaker, but in these little 2-minute chunks of time, it's like, that doesn't matter. That could be a lie. I don't know. I don't care. I believe that Donna's about to die here. And that's something we didn't really get with Jodie's stuff. Maybe someone else felt it, and that's fine. That's great. If you had a great time with that, and if you got sucked into those episodes, that's great. That's great. But I didn't. I never felt like these characters were in danger, despite not even knowing if a certain character was going to make it into a future episode. The acting in the scene prior to the activation was so emotionally damaging for me personally, especially when David Tennant's character, the Doctor, I don't know why I said it like that, I did, is like, why did it have to be this? This Doctor was forced back into this forced back into this location to meet their best friend, and he's going to have to kill her to save the day, and it's like, it's clear that this character just like, you know what, maybe London deserves to burn. For this one person that I truly care about, maybe this is the one moment where I be the bad guy because I don't want to lose my best friend and I don't want to cause it. But he does it anyway because he's the Doctor, and that's great. And you always know that. Like again, there's all these inevitables with the filming and the actors that are going to appear in the announcements. It's like the writing within the show. It's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you know outside. It doesn't matter what you know will happen. It's the fact that the writing and the directing and the acting are just so good that you don't care because anything could still happen. Unfortunately for the story, after this perfect scene, it's followed by one of the more controversial moments in the episode. I say controversial, I saw a lot of negativity on social media. A lot of my friends and family were like, that bit was weird. But I can imagine that outside of this bubble, it's more of a controversial thing. I don't see it being purely negative or purely positive. How they dealt with the Dr. Donna was fine when they used Donna's child as a way to lessen the impact, shall we say. It made sense and it gave Rose, Donna's daughter, an important footnote within the story, which is great because other than that, she didn't really serve a purpose. I could have easily hand waved the rest if they said the remaining energy was pushed out during childbirth or the split lessened the impact on the body and they both would have been fine after that. Or that signs of them remembering the Doctor was just the energy leaking out or whatever. I was so happy you could have done almost anything and I would have gone with it. What we were then left with was a weird female empowerment message that feels a bit blind and tone deaf. After addressing the fact the Doctor was literally a woman a couple hours ago. You can wave the moment away, but it didn't have to be that. It could have been almost anything else. The Meep also lost a lot of narrative weight by this point too, which is crazy because it was such a great part of the episode until like the last third. After watching the episode a couple of times, it doesn't take away from the first 2/3, but the dip in quality right at the end isn't really ignorable. To then cap the episode off, we have the Doctor and Donna jumping back into the TARDIS to travel once more until Donna spills a cup of coffee on the TARDIS console. That bit's pretty forced, but yeah, okay, sure, whatever. Shrug, let's go to the next adventure. That's pretty much the bottle episode for the 3 specials. Wild Blue Yonder is our second special. The best and scariest of them all. I'm not going to say much about it because I think it's an almost perfect episode, especially when you know very little going into it, and I don't want to throw that at someone even by accident. Go watch it if you haven't. The most important thing to mention about this episode is I don't like the Mavity joke. I don't think it's particularly funny. It's a bit cringe, if I'm honest. Isaac Newton being a different ethnicity is also weird. Not an important change. Isaac's race isn't important within the narrative and themes, but for accuracy's sake, it's a weird choice that doesn't feel right when representation has been so important to the show over the last few years. I recognized who it was immediately, so the actual importance of this change is just a silly discussion at best. This episode is important to me for one reason beyond the quality. It's the first one that actually declared the aftermath of the Flux and how the Doctor is processing that conclusion. Which I can't even describe how excited I was to hear that. I wasn't a fan of Flux, but just hearing that it did matter and the time we spent wasn't wasted. The narrative weight of the Flux had an impact upon the franchise and the characters in it, despite it being ignored for multiple episodes. These specials created a gap of self-acceptance between the Flux and the future of the show, but I would love to see the effects of the Flux continue, especially out in the universe itself, because it created so many possible storylines and potential changes for races and cultures that we're currently familiar with. Of course, depends on the writer, but with these specials, RTD has proven he can do that. and at the conclusion of the episode, we had a final appearance from Wilf, a character that has been so important to the community, and Bernard Cribbins did such a great job with the character. It's gonna be the last time we see them. Probably, I don't know. It's a time travel thing. Maybe we might see a younger version of the character or whatever. That's always possible, but for now, it's gonna be the last time we see them, and that's sad. People cried. I I don't think I cried. I remember crying. I remember crying here. Um, but it's a moment that, while short, and while definitely they had more planned with his character, just maybe a little bit, nothing, nothing outrageous, but they definitely had a few more scenes planned. I would love to see them. I would love to see the plans for them. But if this is all we get, I'm okay with that. Since we're about halfway, I think it's time I talk about the TARDIS interior. I think it's gorgeous. I love the potential for interior shots and confrontations and maybe an exploration of more of the rooms. We always wish that. We barely ever get it, but the possibility is always there, and we have more doors, so who knows? I get the complaint of the lack of furniture, but that kind of thing hasn't always been considered, so it's not something I need within the console room itself. My imagination can push a lot of that to the further rooms that we don't see. While Blue Yonder, I would argue, does the most setup for the future of the show. You get the emotional scenes with the Doctor and Donna, and the salt scene which sets up the next episode, and probably the fantasy elements in the next season. Which I'm all here for, especially after the fairy tale vibes that we got in season 5 and some of 6. Love good sci-fi, but I think Doctor Who has the ability to play outside, thanks to the historicals of the past that give enough leeway to use more fantastical elements. Overall, I have pretty much nothing to complain about. It's probably the closest to a perfect episode in my opinion, but episodes that I have loved in the past, like Silence in the Library, Blink, and Midnight, have lessened in quality over a few watches and years. The Giggle is the most mixed episode out of the 3 with David, in my opinion. It has a lot of the good, but a few weird little moments that keep the episode from being better than the others in its entirety. The opening moments with the doll are great setup for the character of the Toymaker and the actual outside threat of people rioting, even if that threat isn't really explored. You get a great moment with Kate, but other than that, the actual intro scene with the riot feels pretty disconnected to the rest of the story. Having a little giggle in every screen works and feels like a very Moffat idea, which brings me to the fact that you can feel Moffat in most scripts. It's obvious RTD really enjoyed his run and what he accomplished with tone, hence the fantasy elements that we're seeing, but little things like the giggle in every screen has strong roots in how Moffat would introduce a threat and begin the process of foreshadowing. And seeing the merging of these two fantastic Doctor Who writers is really nice to see after multiple stories that I would consider incoherent. Then after the writing scene, we transport ourselves to Unit, and the following moments with the 2-on-1 with Donna, the Doctor, and the Toymaker. This scene and every other scene with Neil Patrick Harris on screen shines, but the next few coming scenes after the introduction between these three, I would in particular argue made for the best moments in these 3 specials. You have the moment where the Doctor almost breaks down talking to Donna. You got the Donna and puppet scene, which is super creepy despite looking a bit crap, and the best scene being the companion puppet play. I saw a bunch of people complaining, you miss this companion and this companion, but those people clearly don't really get the point of the scene. It's about something horrible happening to a companion under the Doctor's protection, and then the Doctor finding a way to sort of move on from that. Oh, this thing happened, yeah, sure, but blah, 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 blah. It gives them an escape out of that. Oh, bad thing happened, but that doesn't matter because this happened, so it isn't all bad. These characters still died under his watch, and due to narrative bull, stopped it from being permanent. But RTD is using these moments to focus on why the Doctor can't just walk away like nothing happened. It did, and despite what happened, he needs to come to terms with all of it. All of the bad. Yaz getting kind of dumped isn't as bad isn't as bad as in comparison to what happened to everyone else. Hell, Dan got a much worse fate being a companion and traveling. If you want to feel bad for anyone, look at him. Anyway, that's just a small bit of tension between me and the community. Now, the stuff with Mel. It's a bit sad how Russell dealt with her character within the script here. She was just kind of there for a lot of the time. Sure, he gave her some stuff to help the plot and, help others out and create a connection between Classic Who and New Who. But other than that, you could have cut her out of the script and it wouldn't have really made a difference. The dance scene in Unit HQ was great. It was obvious they had a much more limited budget for this scene than how they might have actually wanted it. But it still looked great, and Neil was just the scene. He was the scene, and the scene was him. The Unit Soldier Bull moment was terrifying, and the Doctor saying they were dead was really shocking, and I loved that. All of the Toymaker outfits were great, and it really spiced up each scene. Would have been fine if he just wore the same outfit the whole time, but I'm happy. This is just great. This is the better alternative. Now, the bi-regeneration scene. I feel like people are mixed on it, mainly because it's poorly explained, but also because I think it's different. Just like Jodie, Ncuti came barreling onto the scene with this perfectly formed persona out of the gate. We could have predicted what kind of Doctor he was going to be due to 14 being more openly emotional and casual. And we got, in these specials, we got a lot less Time Lord Victorious moodiness, which is just great, and I'd love to continue this train of the character being much more open, but much more positive, less, oh my people died, or, I'm Time Lord Victorious, grumble, grumble, grumble. I wouldn't mind like a scene or two of it, but like, we've had that now. We've done that. Let's move on, let's do something different and new with it. Having both 14 and 15 verse the toy-making catch was a weird decision, but a fun one. And again, you can hand-wave it, so it's a good time regardless, if you just don't think about it. Even 15 going extra hard and making it difficult for 14 just adds a bit of a spin to the scene, and that kind of invisible change and dynamic really helps the scene feel more dimensional than just a flat, predictable scene. The Toymaker gets defeated in the end, but hopefully not forever. The door is still open to continue that, and I know Neil will be difficult to get a hold of for future episodes, but I don't think it's impossible. And even in that situation, you can just recast the character and just choose someone new and to have them spice up this character, which I'm always a fan of, which is obviously something Doctor Who has been great at from the beginning. And all of these specials have been leading to one big moment, the therapy. I like the idea that this version of the Doctor, 14, relaxing and chilling out on Earth, becomes the curator. The implication isn't there, but it lines up too well and it creates this healthy conclusion to the series if someone did want it. If you wanted that to be the end of Doctor Who in its entirety, you can do that. You can stop here and live your life happy, I think. Just be like, this Doctor becomes the curator, and the other one goes off continuing to save the universe or whatever. You can just do that. And I think that's great. The show needed an ending of a sort, and even though this Doctor is definitely not going to become the curator, I'm going to always think that he will be, because I think that's much more fun. On the other hand, giving Donna her own sort of personal Doctor means Martha's the only David companion, of the main three, who is alone. But her whole character arc was about accepting yourself, that you didn't need to lean on someone else. So, did Martha get the best companion ending? I don't know, up to you really. Now I will leave you with my thoughts on Special 4. The Church on Ruby Road, the first official solo episode for Ncuti Gatwa and Ruby Sunday. I've only seen it 3 times. I'm looking at a fourth when my friend gets back from traveling. One of the bigger notes I have on this episode is how the show has changed with its tone and editing. They've purposefully changed it just slightly enough for it to feel different than the last 3 specials, and that's great. This is a new era with a new face, and they've put the right stamp on it. Ncuti is just delightful the entire time, from sass to the cheeky smile when talking to Cherry. This is a different Doctor, and I just want more of him. I don't know if he'll be my favorite. I've really been struggling with that kind of ranking because it constantly changes. It all depends on who I've seen the most of and how recently. I think it's 8 currently, but I really need to go back through those audio adventures to see if I still feel like that. I liked Ruby Sunday in this episode. I don't love her yet, I don't think. The episode spent more time setting up her background than her as a person. I don't know if she has hobbies. I don't know if she has act beyond her small little band and her family. I don't really know if she has friends or like a set routine. I guess we kind of saw her set routine, but not really. But so far, I like her. I think she's fine. Some people have been saying Rose 2.0. I don't think it's quite that, because I think if we had Rose now, that would feel really cringe, because the 2000s were pretty cringe. But this is a modernized version of Rose in a sense, with a different character twist. I'm sure Ruby's going to want to go back and meet her mum at one point. We're going to have a Father's Day-ish like episode, which is fine. We can have that. But we'll have to wait and see, I suppose, to see how her character really develops and changes. But right now, a bit white bread, but white bread can't hurt you, so. The mother of Ruby could go anywhere. I'm banking on that the person under the robe or cloak is Ruby. We know very little about anything at this point, and so any theory could be true. The community is really running with the idea of the Rani, and that'd be cool, but kind of a boring answer in my opinion. I think we should be doing something new. Goblin song I liked, but I don't love it. The scene is very fun, so I can get away with it being a little over poppy, I should say. The continuation by the Doctor and Ruby is the best bit of the entire song, frankly, and it's not even Spotify, I don't think, last time I checked. I like the goblin designs, making them look very Greyman Alien-esque was a good call. The Goblin King looked like a bit bland, but that kind of ties into my negatives towards the goblins in general. I love the luck coincidence rope nonsense. It's so silly and weird that just works really well for a unique mechanic, and leaning on that fantasy element really helps with that. My only issue with that is the unlucky moments caused around Ruby in the beginning of the episode. If they were legitimately just random coincidences and random unlucky moments that weren't caused by the goblins, that would work better in my opinion, because they were creating these moments to attract themselves in a sense. I know that's not what really was happening, but those moments were so poorly explained. Well, or I just didn't understand what was happening, and that could go either way. But I've seen the episode 3 times and I'm still scratching my head. Anyway, I like the rope mechanics. I like the goblin design besides the king. I don't know, there's just something weird about them and their actual actions in the episode that I just don't like. 2 final notes before I stop with the video. 1, the Goblin King getting impaled on the church is awesome. That was so unexpected, and I loved it. Also the gloves. The gloves were really cool. Like, if we get a Doctor who stays up to date with like technology and creates gadgets, like I think 13 should have been doing this entire time, that would be great. Give me a Doctor who wants to stay up to date and wants to create and have gadgets that will legitimately help them in everyday situations for them. So the gloves, they were cool. I would love to see the gloves make a return. And my last note is 15 and Ruby, their relationship is a much more nurturing one. Well, a friend noticed anyway. And I get notes of that for sure, especially in the teaser trailer for season 1. And if we get a relationship like that, I am so down for that, because I don't want another romance one. I don't want a best friend kind of thing like we had with Donna. I want something different. I want the Doctor to take care of Ruby, and I want that, because I think that'd just be great. That'd be something different, and that would just be cool. I'm gonna keep saying that'd be cool because it just would be. So those were the specials. They were very special, and while I think the Church and Ruby Road is the weakest of the four, I mostly blame that on poor exposition than anything else. People complain about pace, but that didn't really bother me. I think the show's pace has changed, and that's a good thing. It allows for more open, emotional scenes, and after a few years of the opposite of that, I'm very grateful. It's like salt and pepper. You don't always need it, but you miss it when it's gone.